Hi and welcome to 21st Century Saints, our podcast and live stream series for members and those affiliated with or adjacent to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints here in the United Kingdom and around the world. Now I'm starting out flying solo tonight because my co-hosts, who I'm sure will pop up in the chat just shortly, we have Ruth who's headed off to an evening at the races, so I hope she's having a wonderful time, and Sarah who's living her best life looking after her grandchildren, and they are adorable. And I love boundaries. I love we know how to prioritize here. So this is going to be a really interesting subject tonight. It's one that's very, very close to my heart. It's one that I'm hoping we'll get a lot of discussion about in the chat. We are in very, very different places in this audience. Some people have left the church. Some people are still trying to make it work or quite happily. It works very well in their lives. But there are some things that we all deal with no matter where we are. So we're going to be talking a little bit about church, specifically church anxiety tonight. So I am hearing that my signal might not be the best. So hopefully, if I just kind of try and close down the rest of the tabs. Okay, if the audience, can you let me know how it goes, and hopefully things will settle down. The joys of live streaming. So while we're trying to figure this out and while we're hoping that it all settles down, I want to just shout out a couple of messages before we bring on my one of our favourite guests. If we're going to talk about uncomfortable subjects, and everything's got better. Okay, that's fantastic. So I think I was asking my laptop to do way too much. If we talk about uncomfortable subjects, we have someone fantastic to, if I'm feeling comfortable, a really good person in our lives is the wonderful David Sheppard, who does fantastic work in this space. So he's going to join us in a moment. But before he does, I need to do a quick bit of housekeeping. First of all, donors, you have allowed us to do so much, and the especially recurring donations that are coming in every month, we are so thankful. I know that you're aware that we put your donations to very, very good use. It's allowed us to keep people safe. It allows us to have these tough conversations. And it allows us to have these fun conversations. And all in all, hopefully make this a healthier space. So thank you for that. And for those of you who are thinking about donating, we have a donor box link. You can go to our website and donate from there. And also you can now send us a super chat, which I have never used before, that we're in a new position to. So hopefully if that works, I will be able to bring your comment and screen and thank you properly in real time, which will be really nice for us to be able to do. So thank you if you're thinking about donating. If you find this content valuable and you're not in a position to make a donation, just know that we really appreciate you. And if you want to share our work or send us a message if there's anything you'd like to discuss further, or even if you need us to talk about something specific, then please do reach out, because your feedback means the world. This episode specifically, we think is going to do a lot of good. Now, while I'm mentioning you can go to the website and make a donation, we'd also like you to know that our website is currently undergoing a little bit of a facelift. She was a bit tired looking. She was doing a great job, but you know what? She wanted a revamp. So we are remodeling her, and there's some new sections in the website. Some of it's still under construction. So go take a look around, but don't forget to come back, because there's lots still to go on there. There is also a store section in our website. So if you would like some merch, a t-shirt, a tote, we have some really, really cool stuff on there for you. Now, with the section of the website, just know, please, that it's not perfect yet. It's a little bit messy, and finding products isn't the easiest thing to do. So yeah, we're in a pretty big transition phase right now. We have a lot to do. But please do give us your feedback if you're aware of any improvements that we could make. Really important thing that we want to let you know before we start, and that was the big news that we had announced last week. So many of you have got in touch and had asked about the safeguarding changes that are happening here in the United Kingdom. That we're in this wonderful transition phase of implementing policies which are just the beginning of a safeguarding journey. How does that happen in your area, wherever you are in the world? So what we decided to do was to organise a bit of a conference. So we're organising a safeguarding training workshop. If you want to sign up, we have a Zoom link. Now that currently is only posted, I think, on our Facebook page, so you may have to go and have a look, but we will get it across the website, and we'll promote it a little bit more fully across our sites as we go. It's on September the 10th. And all you have to do is completely free. If you think you might want to do something in your area, or just see who else is interested in doing some work, or just learn a little bit about how you can advocate for really important things, for safeguarding changes to keep vulnerable children, vulnerable adults safe, we're going to tell you what we've learned. We've also got some really exciting people lined up to speak at that workshop. So if you can make it, go check out on our Facebook page at the moment, and we'll post it wherever, but we would love to have you join us. We're working very, very hard on that right now. So with that, and thank you for all the comments so far, and especially thank you, Catherine, for being our first ever super chat. We really appreciate you. I feel quite excited. I had no idea what that would look like. Isn't it pretty? So we really appreciate you. Thank you so much on behalf of all of the team here at 21st Century Saints. Now, we are ready to have this conversation. I'm going to bring on to chat the wonderful David Sheppard. David, it's great to have you with us tonight. Do you want to say hey to the audience?
Hello, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Really appreciate the work that you do. Would you mind, if it's okay, giving our audience a little bit of your background, just to sort of reintroduce what it is you do and how you're connected with Mormonism?
Sure. So yeah, my name's David Sheppard. I'm a qualified counsellor, therapist, what you want to say. And yeah, I've been in practice now for sort of year and a half, 2 years. So very much in the beginning part of that journey, really. But yeah, I've connected to Mormonism. I was raised in the LDS Church and was a member till about I was 23, and had a sort of started my own sort of faith transition, faith journey, which ultimately led me to question some things, and I eventually stopped attending and left the church. But with all of that, I'm still very, as it never leaves, and that the connection to the world of Mormonism is something that's remained interesting, and the people I still love very much. And yeah, it's really exciting just when you're talking about all the changes that are being made specifically in the UK as well. It's wonderful.
Definitely. And this, do you know what? I don't care who you are. This subject of Mormonism is bloody fascinating. There's so many interesting things to talk about. Even if you don't actively practice, it's just really fascinating. And I think your perspectives are really going to help tonight. This is, again, if you are in the chat and if you have anything specific you would like to ask David, we are going to talk about it. But I want to frame tonight's discussion. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Sarah, and I hope, I know she's okay with this. I know she's absolutely fine with this, but I've been super aware that as a friend, I have experienced church anxiety when I get to go, but I don't get to go to church that often. So seeing how Sarah's been engaging has been I don't know. I guess I've been kind of experiencing it through her and maybe for her. So Sarah's engagement with church, kind of looks like just she will respond to her needs. If she's going to go to church, she'll go to church. And I think it kind of looked like maybe about once a month, something like that, a couple of times a month, until she recently received her calling as a stake safeguarding specialist, which is super important to her, and it's something that she's very, very passionate about. But it's meant that she's having to, directly engage with church more than she initially had planned for her own self-care. So it's led us to have lots of conversations about church anxiety when it starts. So we're having the conversation, how early in the week do you start experiencing it? Is it the Saturday night? Is it from the Friday night, because the Saturday's just the trigger, because that's preparation day? And we know that this is super common for Latter-day Saints to experience. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean, as I'm sure we all know, that there's some underlying reason that someone actually really wants to leave the church. People can be very comfortable in their church experience, and yet experience church anxiety. So could you maybe speak a little bit to that? Why would someone experience church anxiety in a place that they want to be?
I think that whether you're a new member or you're someone who's been in the sort of the church for a long time, and just being a part of a group, being a part of a culture means that there's, there are values and there are expectations around what, I suppose, in the framework of Mormonism, what being a active, words like activity, worthiness, just feeling like you're on the right path, the covenant path, just denotes that there's a lot of expectations. So, depending on how sensitive we are to those, can really have an impact on us. What does it look like from the outside to be a Mormon in our members' eyes, or to our fellow saints when we go to Sunday? I'm not in this position at the moment because I don't attend, but when I hear stories about this idea that when, for example, when families are getting the kids ready and they're just screaming at the kids, hurry up, we need to get ready and we need to, and then this feeling of that where they describe, feeling a need to present in a certain way and to present in the way that they maybe imagine that other people would expect them to be, and what feels acceptable to people. And feeling accepted is a really important part of just of living and connecting with other people. If we don't feel accepted, our threat levels get higher, and those anxieties around, well, what does it mean if I don't feel included or accepted or understood or heard, or insert word here. That starts spiraling, and it's very easy to then just for that to go from one thing to the next until it becomes very uncomfortable and we just don't really know how quite to be.
We have just a superb question in the chat here, and it's actually, what I think an active church member who feels quite happy, who maybe wouldn't recognize any experience of threat, would maybe describe themselves as feeling accepted. I mean, I have to say, I go and I feel accepted. I feel loved. I don't feel judged. I'm very, very lucky. There are good people that I can reach out to. But I think we can feel a couple of things at the same time. I can also feel that, I'm the fringy one, or the person that's going to have to say the comment that no one else is going to say. Initially, we, I think, often go down that immediate road of, it's me. If I feel uncomfortable, it's because there's something not right within me. Either I've done something, I'm feeling something, but I'm out of, what would you call that? Out of sort of sync with the spirit.
That there's some kind of disharmony happening. because the thing is, if you're not worried that someone else isn't judging you, you're probably worried that you yourself are going to be judging yourself, because you can go to church and still feel like
Ooh, yeah.
I'm not acceptable even to myself. So you're naturally going to feel more uncomfortable while feeling that way, and having to again present in a certain way to other people. And also our relationship with God, if we don't feel acceptable to God, or accepted, or if we're feeling indebted, or that we need to be repentant, hypocritical, all of those feelings just create this idea that of discomfort within ourselves, and our faith, and it hits our self-esteem. What happens when our self-esteem
Mm.
goes down? Anxiety probably goes up.
What about when a faith framework is working really well? And I think the ideal is that a person would go to church and maybe feel some level of discomfiture in that, yeah, I need to improve on that, or this is something I would like to work on in my life. It's a time of sort of self-reflection, and we want to move towards improvement, and this is partly recognizing that, being part of a community process of what repentance looks like. If it worked really, really well, how can I know whether it's me? Should I be feeling anxious about, how do I know if it's guilt, and that it's not actually um, something that I should be feeling? Where is it healthy? Where does it go into unhealthy?
Okay. So what comes to mind with that is that it's where it gets a bit complicated, because
Right.
it depends on how we frame our feelings and emotions. So, for example, um, I didn't coin the phrase, but when people talk about there's no good or bad emotions. There are just emotions. Whether that's anger or sadness, or confusion or happiness. A challenge that can sometimes happen within sort of religious frameworks is the idea that if I'm living a certain way, and doing the things, if I'm kind of hitting those marks, then the should word appears. I should be happy,
Yes, yes.
um, which then complicates things, because if you feel like you should be happy but you're not, or you should be content, or I shouldn't be feeling certain things. If you ascribe um, a negative outlook to anger, for example, which you can see sometimes with in the religious frameworks of I don't know, the contention is of the devil. That if you're quick to anger, it creates this image of you that's, again, you're not maybe living as you should be, or
Hmm.
there's something kind of wrong with you. But if you take the moral question out of it, which is a difficult ask um, sometimes, if you remove the moral side of it, and just acknowledge that this is how I'm feeling in the moment, and what are those feelings telling me about the situation. um, if feelings are used as a kind of a compass, a way to be able to guide how we experience the world, not in the sense of I feel this way, therefore this must be the case, or this must be true, but just to be able to take stock and understand, okay, I'm feeling anger in this moment towards this person, or whenever I'm in this situation at church, I feel like something is arising in me, and I'm trying to understand what that is. And if there's a way of being able to kind of break that down a little bit, and understand where that's kind of coming from, what are the boundaries that are maybe being crossed in that moment? Are there
Oh.
values that I want to be living in my life, but that in these situations I find it really difficult to live those? All of that can create all sorts of difficult feelings, and it's okay to feel them. But if you're connecting those feelings to ideas like, if I'm feeling angry towards someone, that must mean that I don't have the spirit with me. Well, then that's a problem, because now you're you're feeling a certain thing, but you're making it about you. You're making it about something that you've done wrong. And a feeling is just a feeling. Is just a feeling. So that's where it can get complicated with people's relationship with what the spirit feels like to them and how they interpret those feelings. Does that come from me? Does it come from the spirit?
Yeah.
Does that come from Satan? Depending on
Right.
what you're talking about.
I feel like I'm almost working these questions backwards, because that's leading me to ask, from your experience seeing how membership in the church works now with your therapeutic eyes, do you see that everyone feels the spirit in the same way, or those feelings that we understand to be the spirit? Does it look different for everyone, or are we looking for? Is it because my expectations are I should feel this? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, thinking back to just when you learn about what the spirit is, at least within kind of scripture, there's I cannot give you quotes, but things like where you look at the fruits of the spirit and how that's patience and love unfeigned and charity and sort of things like that. There's that aspect of it. So if something has a look of this, then that's of God, which is a sort of a looser definition, but it can get quite tight as well with things like, I feel a swelling, emotional sensation at certain times or in certain situations. So I could not possibly comment on how people feel the spirit. It feels like a
Yeah.
very individual experience.
I guess what I'm wondering is, and I'm just really wondering out loud, um, what would it look like if we were taught to break down what that is? Because if we're taught that the spirit is something that we feel, it's likely to be something sort of external. Um, if we could recognize, okay, this feeling at this moment, I am feeling love for my community. I'm feeling a reciprocity. If in this moment I am feeling compassion and empathy, and and all of those things absolutely can be the spirit, if we want to define it in those terms.
Mm-hmm.
Or as sort of you mentioned, that enlarging, that sort of swelling, I'm feeling emotional stimulation or spiritual stimulation. I wonder what it would be like if we broke it down and actually had a language for what we're just going to umbrella define as the spirit. Because then when I don't feel that when something doesn't feel right, I don't necessarily have a language to explain what that is.
Yeah, and a more frustrating question, I guess, that can come from that is that if I feel uncomfortable with something, is that suggesting that I am wrong and that I need to rethink how I'm processing something and that I need to be more aligned with this? And
Mm.
I'll use the example of um, the recent policy changes within the UK. Um, to many people, their discomfort with the situation of bishops' interviews and people's lived experiences would denote to many people that there's a problem here. There's a problem structurally within the system that leaves me feeling deeply uncomfortable. In some cases, yeah, that you're put in situations that are that can be quite destructive at times. Um, so where do you go with that? Does this discomfort inside me mean that I'm wrong, or the situation that I've found myself in is wrong, and that there needs to be reform? People. I think I sort of think of the suffragettes as well. The idea that women recognize the need to be able to have autonomy in their own lives, that they needed a voice. They needed to be able to
Mm.
make choices for themselves. They needed to be able to support their family without fearing about losing a husband or being in an abusive situation. That anger that they had about the mistreatment that they experienced spurred them into action, which cause the positive change. So I guess the useful thing about being able to be attuned to our feelings is to just understand what they are trying to tell us, and to not necessarily ascribe that to other people, as individuals. I mean, there's the belief in personal revelation. If we could really apply that to ourselves and think, how do I feel in this situation? Is this an experience that needs to be this way, or can I shift gears? Can I move this around in a way where I feel comfortable? And I think sometimes that's where you might experience the discomfort at church, because there's a way of doing things. There's a way of looking. There's a way of sounding. There's vocabulary that we use in church. There are so many unwritten, unwritten rules, unwritten ways of interacting with each other, that you don't even realize until you're on the fringes. You don't even realize there's a weirdness or there's a difference, because you're aligned with it. The moment you step out of it, you realize how uncomfortable that is. And when you try to explain that to someone else, again, it can be often that the assumption is made, well, you just need to rethink it. But maybe that isn't the case, and maybe it's okay to take more time to follow what we feel to be right, and not just go along with whatever the present culture is at the time.
I feel like some of this definitely comes from me delegating my values to the ones that are handed to me, the ones that the church tells me are my values. So that I remember I was talking about it just last year, that I don't even know what my values are. Are they my values? Are they someone else's values? So if someone is bumping up against those values, or if I'm acting in a way that isn't congruent with them, I don't even know that I can recognize it, because I haven't identified what's important to me.
Sure.
So I'd like to come to so Catherine has shared a few fantastic comments on the website, and on the chat, and I feel like this is almost sort of the dictionary, I think, definition of what church anxiety feels like. And in this first one, I experienced anxiety starting with my lesson preparations, because I wanted to continue being a part of the Central Ward community. But I didn't want to be a testimony when I didn't know or believe anymore. So, that sort of that timing is really interesting. So from when you're actually preparing the lesson, what would be happening in that moment? Because we're home, we're safe. What's happening with our minds?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm happy to hear sort of more from Catherine. Don't want to put sort of words in her mouth, but I'm imagining that, when I read the comment, I suppose I'm drawn to the idea that there's an expectation, for example, that at the end of a talk, or at the end of a lesson, we're encouraged to bear our testimony at the end. That is just that's a standard thing that you're not necessarily told. I mean, I'm sure it's probably in teaching manuals and stuff to encourage the teachers to do a certain thing, but even culturally, even without that, there's this sense that not only am I teaching about things that that this is what the lesson's on, but I need to bring myself into that in a way. You can't have that kind of distance of I'm presenting, this is the belief, this is what we're taught, these are the quotes, that this is how we can maybe apply this to our lives. But all of that is with the assumption that you're fully on board with everything. And if you're not, what does that imply about you as the teacher? What does that imply about the church if you're not on board?
It's even as I'm reading it from Catherine, I know this. I didn't make that connection ever in my whole entire life until you're explaining that. Oh my goodness! Thank you, Catherine. It's us. It's our whole, and of course, as we're closing it, it's that. Yeah, we have to confirm. We have to sign to say we agree almost. Catherine then goes on to say, eventually I was open about researching things, which meant member friends offered to help and offered materials. But then there was a people-pleasing pressure to tell them that they helped me.
Mhm.
Thoughts on that? I love the
I think,
opening up, like you're starting to say it out loud, like, yeah, this is kind of tough.
yeah,
Um,
it is. So what comes to my mind with with any kind of I'll speak for myself. When I know that someone is trying to help me with anything, take judge out of it. If I know that someone is trying to help me, if I'm struggling in my own mental health, and I know that there's someone who's, they're really pulling for me, and they're trying to say things or do things that make me feel better. I can really appreciate it, but it might not have the desired effect that's coming to me. And there's a feeling of maybe rescuing that can come out on my part as well, which is what I don't want them to feel disheartened. I don't want them to think, maybe in Catherine's case, the idea that if they don't feel like they're helping me, is that going to impact them negatively? Is that going to mean that, are they going to question their own commitment? Are they going to start having these difficult experiences because of me, because I'm not, I'm not having the right response at the right time? And part of it is that taking responsibility for how someone else is reacting to things. When you know I have to remind myself of this. If someone is trying to help, I try to show my appreciation for it and everything. And but it might not happen the way they want it to happen, and that's okay. And it's okay for them to feel disappointed about it and feel like, oh, maybe there's something else that could happen. That's okay. I'm not in the nicest way possible. I'm not responsible for how that person reacts to me, because I can only do what I can do in this situation. I can't. There's nothing in addition. I can't make myself feel better. But I can show appreciation that that person has thought about me, and that they appreciate the time that they've taken to try to understand me better.
This is baking my noodle because I honestly, I guess I'm just not used to really, really drilling down and thinking about this because, okay, as we were talking about Catherine's fantastic comment, and I'm going to bring the third part up in a second. My assumption when I'm reading that is that the people who are offering help and materials are offering the kind of help and materials that maybe you would offer, or the our buddy Nemo the Mormon would offer, or my pal Ruth would offer. I'm like,
Yeah.
my assumption is they're going to give you something that's going to help, like actually help. No, we're
No.
probably talking about conference talks, and so this final part, I carefully chose my words to thank them for their care and for the materials. How kind are you? I told them I'd read or listen, and that I really appreciated that they took the time to connect with me.
Yeah.
You are lovely.
Yeah. That's a really responding in that way is super helpful, in my opinion,
Yeah,
Catherine,
I
because
also
it takes you're
the heat
showing
out
that
of
you
it.
understand, you're understanding where it's coming from, and that's sort of the point. That this goes perilously close to a different situation, which I'm sure we can address as well, which is that if that, depending on what that help looks like, if it's sharing a talk or something like that, that might be something that's a bit more innocuous, and it might not be helpful at all. It might be a really rubbish talk that you don't connect with, and it's completely the wrong thing.
Uh-huh.
But it could be something that's a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more, um, you know, someone's trying to help with something. It might come across as patronizing or a bit thoughtless. Like there's not a lot of empathy that feels like that's happening, and so that they might
Yeah,
end up feeling judged or.
exactly. I think it's the empathy thing for me because even hearing that, I feel like I want to poke the person in the eye who would have the audacity to do that to Catherine.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the motivation was absolutely lovely. It's just,
Yeah.
I guess what I'm thinking is what a person might be experiencing is that's how you see me. You feel, and I think the other part of it is here's a cut and paste talk. This isn't what you think. This isn't something that's really tailored to my needs. And I know for all of the talks that exist out there, and there's a lot of them, but I can say as an individual, I know there still does not exist one single talk that is completely tailored to my needs. They all require I do the work, and that's okay. But you could tailor it to my needs. You could say something that is just for me and nobody else if you really want to comfort me or help me, maybe have a conversation. Maybe could we talk about that? What I don't know.
Yeah. I think I think from what I hear, you're kind of speaking to that idea partially of being seen. I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
feel seen in my struggle. I don't want to be blamed for whatever I'm going through. I just, and to even communicate that I'm not even looking for answers. I'm not looking for a fix, with this situation. I just want people to know that this is really hard. I'm really wrestling with this. I feel uncomfortable in these situations at church, and rather than that, which I understand that there's that an issue with the culture sometimes, and just with the institution itself. If there's any whiff of a threat, if there's any whiff of disagreement, then that suddenly puts you in a category where you're on the outside, and that that there's an angle that you're trying to make, whereas it could be that your only angle is to express discomfort. I don't feel comfortable in this situation. I don't want to be in this situation because of how I'm feeling.
And I think ultimately, I feel like, I'm joking about, I really did think it would be something helpful or some really interesting, cool material that we can get our teeth into and have a really good discussion about. Why can't that be the case? Why, wouldn't it be wonderful if you didn't need support or a conference talk because you're reading material that is my favorite thing is when someone is arriving in that space, I can say, look, this is really tough. I know that you're going to, that there might be some really challenging times ahead, but the water can be lovely. There is so much to talk about. You're going to be thinking. You're going to be, really diving into how you feel about this space and what your testimony is really about. Wouldn't that be wonderful if we could meet each other in those discussions rather than, oh, let me give you something that will fix this, make you feel better, like not stick plasters on everything. I guess.
It speaks to a couple of issues. One is a human issue, and one is a human issue seen through the Mormon lens. So, for example, human beings aren't particularly great at sitting in discomfort. If we are feeling uncomfortable or vulnerable or anything like that, we will try to get away from that feeling as quick as possible, understandably, because it's not pleasant. We don't want to remain in those sorts of spaces. But we're also uncomfortable when there's someone who is, struggling near us. If someone is in pain, if it's physical pain or emotional pain, that sense, it's kind of bringing us we're suddenly brought into their world. We suddenly feel like there's a responsibility there. We need to act. We need to do something, and that feeling is understandable because we don't like the idea of anyone being in pain. But like we know, there are some things that can't just be, with the click of a finger sorted out. And on those occasions, sometimes it's just nice to be heard, and it's just nice to have someone just, take the time to listen to how we're feeling, and to sit with that, and that be it. And I think within the reason why I think it can be especially difficult in Mormonism is because if any of those feelings, of discomfort, whether it's about a certain belief, how someone feels about polygamy, or how I feel uncomfortable with that, with there's something about the bishop or the eldest quorum president or relief society president that makes me feel unsettled, and I don't really like to be around them. That if there's a challenge to that, if you're voicing it or you're bringing it out into the open, it's assuming there's something wrong. It's assuming there's something wrong with the system, which then by default means that has someone not, I guess, received the right revelation, is someone who's been put in this position. They're supposed to be called of God, but I'm seeing something that is very much not godly, and it then, so from what again seems like quite an innocuous thing, becomes a real challenge to something very entrenched and deeply set in someone's identity. The moment anything to do with the church is challenged, it can then be felt very quickly as a direct attack.
Yeah, do you
people
know?
can't tolerate those spaces.
Maybe because I feel like we're always like one step away from safeguarding, because it's always it's what we're dealing with every day.
Yeah.
But, I mean, and this is going to lead into the next comment I'm going to read from Angie, which is just superb. Actually, I'm going to let you sit with the comment for a minute and I'll share in a second. But Angie says, in any group, I sometimes feel like the little boy in the Emperor's New Clothes. Do I shout out, or do I lose who I am in conformity? Which I think is just a superb thing for us to discuss. But I wanted to sort of maybe connect those two ideas also a little bit. We've been speaking to so many people who have talked about their discomfort in what seems like very simple social interactions in church, of shaking hands, of hugging, of just how people physically touch, and how they haven't wanted that, and the things that they have to put themselves through, the questions they ask themselves about why they don't want that. Is there a moral judgment about the person, or maybe it is because they feel really, really uncomfortable with that person touching them? And I just think it's really interesting that we're actually analyzing what's happening in our minds rather than be able to create a boundary of, I just don't really want to you wouldn't go to work and be hugging everybody in sight necessarily, but you have closer people who you may or may not. And Sarah and I had heard just a while back, this fantastic description of how for a couple of people it felt like they had to get past the ward greeter, the person who would hold the door open, because you have to provide a hug before you are allowed to go into church. And if you don't provide that hug, or let's extend that hug, that handshake, that smile even, then what is it you're saying about me? And that actually often is said too. So anyway, what do we do? What about conformity and saying what we're experiencing or what we're seeing?
Yeah, it's a good question, and yeah, it's difficult because different cultures have different norms and values and expectations, and like you alluded to earlier, if there's a sense where I don't even really know my own, how the hell are you going to be able to enforce or present a boundary to someone that that's making it quite clear that that's not just something I'm comfortable with?
Well, because the group will create the boundaries. The group will tell me when something's happening that's not quite right, or other people will shout out. What happens, like Angie, you see, for me, if because I generally, that's not true. I inherently want to be the person who waits, and I'm looking for signs from the group that there's something amiss, and then I can respond. But obviously in church, the hard work becomes when you're the person who actually is having to say, because you're very aware of who's listening and what harm could be caused by you not saying something, or that you just don't want to be agreeing by not speaking out. For me, and for so many people in this space, do you shout out or lose who you are? I would see the person who's doing the shouting out and think, "Oh, I'm going to be friends with you. you're
Yeah.
you're someone I want to know better." So I suppose it can bond too. Maybe.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, some of those actions might isolate you from certain people, but then it might bind you to others, and there's always more of the fear about us being isolated because it's a genuine threat. If you're a believer of evolution, that or if you start understanding a bit of history, the human race has been able to prevail so well because of our ability to work together and to work as groups and to think and reason together and to create things together. So what's what's the consequence of not being a part of that group? What does that mean for me? Well, historically speaking, it would mean that it would be pretty hard to get food. It'd be pretty hard to stay warm. It'd be pretty hard to be safe in any respect because you don't have the companionship of other people. And even though we're not fighting lions or running away from tigers or anything necessarily, certainly not in the UK, foxes maybe. We're not facing those threats, but they're just as real, and our minds respond to them as with an understanding that if I don't feel connected, if I don't feel part of this, then what does that mean me? Am I just going to be on the outside? And those are
Yeah.
really real. That's a real concern.
Mm.
So something I kind of wanted to address as well, I guess, is this idea of boundaries. And I talked a little bit about this at my workshop at Thrive, and it's this idea about, um, and I got this from Dr. Gabor Mate, who's a Hungarian psychiatrist, and he asked the question: at what point um, do we start to develop boundaries, from us to other people? And whenever you ask the audience, they tend to guess a lot higher, than like, maybe 8 or, 5 or, when we're in teenagers or even adults. Everyone has quite a different opinion on it. And he, yeah, he responds by saying, if you've ever been near a baby that doesn't want to have what you're giving it, whether it's food or whether it's medicine or we wanted to brush its hair or put clothes on, the moment any of that goes near their face and they're doing this, for those that can't, I'm turning my head away
Yeah.
vehemently because I do not want what you're giving me. So boundaries and our experience of them are there from the get-go. They're not something that develops later. We have boundaries and we establish them very clearly when we're younger. But as we get older, depending on our circumstances, who's around us, the cultures that we find ourselves in, we are taught to unlearn boundaries, and we're taught to, in order to conform and to be part of this wider group, we're told to, yeah, even if you feel uncomfortable about something or something doesn't feel right to you, do it anyway, because otherwise you're going to be on the outside. So then you
Mm.
wrestle with the idea of, do I set this boundary and create safety for me, or is that boundary excluding me from the group? So it's not an easy trade-off. And I think when, within the context of church, yeah, do I tell people I don't really want to shake your hand, but it's lovely to see you, or I just don't, I'm happy to give the lesson because I know the lesson inside out, but I'm not in a place where I feel mega comfortable bearing my testimony about Joseph Smith at the end. These are principles
Yeah.
that I think are important, which is why I'm happy to give the lesson in the first place, but I don't want to be going on about Heavenly Father or Jesus Christ in this instance because I don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah, and I think it's trying new things, I suppose, as well, to see what works and what doesn't work. Because we don't have to marry ourselves to one particular strategy. I guess. Public service announcement: if you don't want to shake hands or hug, if you are clear in your mind that you don't want to do it ahead of time, take a little bit of time to think about how you're going to respond to that. And so what I have learned from experience and what I highly recommend is keeping our, sort of we tend to lean into people when we're engaging, is to sort of slightly lean back, have the shoulders slightly back. And for women, it's super, super weird, but men do it to enjoy, as you're coming in and clasping a hand from underneath. So rather than a handshake, it's, you can sort of go from underneath, and then you're not having to get the hug, and you're sort of almost sort of clamshelling someone's hand, and there is no hug that is happening today. And if you don't want to shake hands, then just keeping your hands firmly behind your back and a sort of a little nod as you keep moving. So thinking about these things ahead of time can really save a lot of frustration. I'm going to maybe come back to boundaries here, and because Catherine goes on to say in the comments that well, reacting to things is one part of it. The other part is not wanting to reveal to people just how much I'm struggling to maintain my belief that is falling out from under me. Oh my goodness, that speaks to my soul. Because I feel really, really strongly that people don't have the right to know things. That, if I invite you into this conversation, then I'm going to have to trust that you will respect where I am and that you will deal with that information responsibly. That someone isn't going to necessarily feel, I'm going to have to speak to the bishop about my concerns about. Do you know what I mean? About perfectly normal things that people are going to respond to responsibly. Do you have any thoughts about keeping that privacy, or should we want to be more public about how we feel?
Again, Catherine, I love these points, are so helpful. So thank you for contributing. So I'm going to use a slightly different example again, just to take it away from church just for a second, because it might be a bit more palatable, easy to connect to. That. So people, myself included, but certainly people who I know, sometimes they, if they experience, any kind of mental health difficulties, whatever it looks like, sometimes there's that sense of duty or an obligation, like, I want to tell people about it. And sometimes there's a feeling that can come up of, like, I wish I could talk about it, but it's just too hard, but does that mean that I'm letting the side down? Does that mean I'm not advocating for people, and that I'm, not a part of the solution and everything like that? And what I try to focus on in that instance is this idea that if you have a voice and that you feel that you can use it, and you decide this is something that I want to dive into, that's wonderful. If you're just getting by and you need to keep it to yourself, if you need to work this stuff out internally, but you may never get to the point where you're going to open up. That's fine too. There's no wrong or right ways of managing our experiences. And if we feel safe, because some wards you could be mega safe, you could say whatever, and people are going to be like, oh, you're just great, we love you, and other ones you're going to say something and off with their head. So there can't be, by definition, a right or wrong answer for anyone. If you have the privilege of feeling safe with the people around you, hope maybe you will feel more inclined. So to bring it back into the church dynamics, if you're someone that struggles with their belief about something and they really don't know how they feel about this particular topic in church history, or whether it's about it, current stuff, LGBTQ issues, it's okay. I'm going to be careful with this, because I'm very much acknowledging my privilege in this situation. I am not someone from that community. I'm not a woman. I'm the top of the hierarchy of the privilege list. If you feel comfortable to talk about that and you have that voice and you feel safe to do so, great. If you're not in that place, you're not letting anyone down. No one expects you to, be the people's champion and to do it. We all have different skills and different abilities and different thresholds and sensitivities. We do what's right for us at the end of the day, and that's something that can often be lost in the situations. We're feeling like we need to do what's right for everyone, and that's it's a human thing. It's a very very Mormon thing as well. I'll sacrifice myself for the group. I'll give everything I have to make sure that everyone else is okay. But it's okay to start off with that. I need to make sure that I'm okay and I feel safe. And if I can add to something else in time, great.
Yeah.
But there's no expectation, and you're not letting anyone down if you don't add your voice.
Can we come to our beloved the Brit Avengers daddy, Peter Bleakley? Peter says feeling over responsible for everyone else's feelings ironically ends up creating a community, meetings and lessons where no one is able to be fully honest or relax and feel good. Oh my goodness, yes,
Yeah.
that sums up my Mormon experience. Should we be, how responsible are we for other people's feelings? Do we need to think about that?
That's a good question. So it comes in two parts. So one is just the acknowledgement that we live in shared spaces. So we don't need to be looking at a very black and white framework, which is that I even need to be super super aware of everyone, and and you're barely able to make any kind of decision because you're having to think about literally every person in the room. But there can be an awareness of what's going on around you. I'm trying to think how to frame, and it's flown out of my head. I'm going to relook at Peter's comment because I was onto something, but it's flown
Yeah,
out.
it's just, I guess I'm thinking a little bit about the friends who have talked about how people at church can feel very safe in making comments or sharing views within classes. That I suppose in other contexts may even be considered hate speech, but that they would maybe share their views on relationships, on marriage, on gender, all of these kind of things, and feel quite empowered to do it. And we just kind of need to deal with it because people at church are often going there to feel comfortable and and safe and have their values reaffirmed, and that's okay if that's how you want to engage with church and how it meets your needs. But we'll also sort of feel that people can give these views, but I don't feel safe enough to give my views. Now, where does that intersect? How safe do we want to feel that we can challenge beliefs at church? How should I be concerned about the fact that there's an 80-year-old lady who just came out this week, and this is it, this is our interaction, and she doesn't need to hear about my frustrations with the LGBTQ situation in the church? Is that tough for her? Is it tough for me? How do we negotiate this? Do I need to be thinking more about other people in church? Sidebar, I am always thinking about other people in church, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, I don't imagine we can really divorce ourselves from that situation. I think that there's always, I suppose it's useful to know that whenever we open our mouths, and we're going on the proper like culture of woke culture and everything like that. My sense for people's difficulty with that is that well, I can't say anything right. I can never vocalize my opinion because it's just gonna upset someone or something like that. And I think if we're living in a way where we understand that the words that we say have an impact on people, and we don't we're not necessarily wanting there to be, and if we're called out on it, if there's something that we've really said something that we just were not aware, it's useful. We can we grow from those experiences. We learn, okay, maybe that there's a subsection of people that I've never even thought about, and I think it's a hard question to answer because there is no one answer. There's no, it's, and I think staying away from the polarities is actually maybe part of the solution. Ultimately, it's this feeling of should, or that when the word should comes into our mind at any time, we need to look at that with some element of suspicion, in some ways, because in many instances, when we say should, those are values that we have either been given to us when we were younger, or we are aware of values that are coming in from outside. And it could be that we align with those values, but we might not. So if we are having times when we're experiencing that should, which again very much happens in these sorts of these cultures and contexts, the moment we start saying should, to challenge why, what is the reason? Do I actually believe that if I don't practice my faith in this very specific way, then that's going to have this kind of impact on me? Do I believe that, or is that something that's being handed to me? We have that ability. It's there with us, but sometimes that's one of those boundaries where over time we can learn to just put our own thinking on the side, put our brain on the side, and just kind of go along with whatever we're told, and that's not the most useful.
PLS, thank you so much for the super chat. We really, really appreciate it. I guess what I kind of wonder is that it seems to be the church solution. I think even it's maybe in some of the handbook statements that we avoid speaking about things that are controversial. And we sort of try and encourage people to stay in the safe zones, which is really difficult, I think, when our faith really does live in a world where it's constantly bumping up against this. And there seems to be quite a lot of safety. It's only controversial really if it's saying, if it's saying something that might bump up against those sort of traditional values. I guess I just wonder what it would look like if, because maybe 99% of the time we are doing that, and we're just listening and we're observing, and we don't, because I love the idea that we don't have to respond to everything. Everything does not have to be my fight, or this is someone's opinion, and I've not come to church today to change it. I've come to church today so that I can experience whatever it is I need to experience. I am practicing my faith in my own way, and it becomes about other people then. But if I spend 99% of church doing that, and maybe there's just a thing every now and again I can say that leads to part of what a healthier overall discussion will look like. I guess I just would like to see church moving in that kind of way, where we just try it and see what it's like. And then what it would lead to maybe is, as Sarah said earlier on, one of her coping strategies is having to debrief as soon as possible. We need to talk about this. We need to talk about, that even hearing a hymn can be really, really frustrating. But before we come to post-church strategies, then maybe we could talk about strategies. And there are a couple of specific places I want to go with this. We were talking about a situation there for Catherine where she's preparing lessons. I remember being in a situation where serving was just too much in the calling that I was being asked to do. So there are things that would be simple and straightforward, and I can very much keep in a box. There are other things like primary that were going to require me. A lot of my my energy, and just, you know, because you can't half-ass primary, right? You've got all of these little energy suckers, and when you have very little to begin with, you know, it's just not practical, and it's not healthy. And working with children is something that I've been passionate about, and I know how to do it. But I remember preparing for church, and it's starting, I would say for me, it starts around about Friday night, and thinking, I'm praying these kids don't turn up today. I love these kids. They are wonderful. I love to spend time with these kids. But I don't want to do this, and I'm praying they're not going to go. And I spoke to the bishop, and who immediately was, we're going to release you. We don't like to ask to be released. We're taught that it's a negative. Could you talk a little bit about how, if we're going to do it, how do we do it safely, and where do we think about maybe communicating that this is not healthy for me right now, to someone who may be in a position to sort of rework that?
Okay, so I've actually come prepared with some notes of different examples that, you know, you might come across those kinds of dynamics. I'm just going to read out what I've written and then kind of go from there. So I've kind of titled it, you know, how to stay engaged in attending church, you know, as a non-believer, or not as orthodox, or just even a full-on believer, but trying to make things work for them as best and as healthily as they can. So my point number one is, it's okay to walk out of a lesson, meeting, prayer, song, and the building. E.g., if we suddenly feel like we're going to, you know, for example, if we suddenly feel like we're going to vomit or faint or soil ourselves, there wouldn't be any question in anyone's mind that it's okay to leave the room. It's okay to go to the toilet. It's okay to go outside, get some fresh air, calm down. It is no different with mental health, or with, you know, if there's any emotional struggles or tensions or triggers or anything like that. It is okay to leave. It is always okay to leave at any point. It doesn't matter whether that's a physical or a mental ailment or challenge. It's all the same. There is no difference at all. If you know, could you imagine telling someone like, no, you have to stay? Like, yeah, just be, you know, sick on your lap, and deal with it, you know, because you don't want to, you know, you don't want the person who's teaching the lesson to feel like you're not that interested in the lesson. Like, come on. That's not what we're thinking in that situation. Let's see.
It's just, I'm thinking of all those times as you're saying that you know, the whole internet is preparing because, you know, on a given week, it's the Family Proclamation Week, or it's Mother's Day, or it's one of those things that tend to be a trigger for lots and lots of groups of people. The assumption is you're going to go, you're going to listen, you're going to sit, and we can leave I know there is a door. I know it does open, but I can avail myself of that. It's so funny that we can to be told these things.
Yeah, well, because culturally, you know, if you're in if you're chilling out in the corridor, you've got some, I'd probably say bloke, some guy who just like comes along and just like, oh, you should be in this lesson, and it's just like, well, I don't want to be in there right now.
Right.
I'm okay, thank you. You know, and again, it's probably coming from a nice place. They're thinking, you know, well, surely you're going to feel better being in the room, and you get the chance to feel the spirit. And the intent is there, but it's not necessary. You don't need to be in there. If you're getting something from it, awesome. If you're not, it's fine to not be in the room.
When my son, who is extremely tall and has always been extremely tall, and he just looks like the mutant child in primary, that you're, you know, how are you even here? Because he was so little and he looked so big, and one of the things that we would do, because it was the simple act of being in church in general became the trigger, but being in sacrament meeting. And what everyone then has to do is we have to be reverent and we're going to be quiet. But what happens when we're quiet, even, if there's hymns or reflection time during or a talk, I then think, and I'm thinking a lot, and this doesn't feel good. And he would end up feeling very panicky and very, very, very distressed. And we would do things like, we would take a blanket to church. He'd be, sort of wrapped up. And some of the most powerful experiences we had is when he needed to leave, and we would practice, how he would do that and let me know that he needed to take some time, was we would meet with other people in the foyer who also needed to have that break. And the experience of seeing, this wonderful adult man who has a mental health condition that's very, very extreme. And I've got a little boy who doesn't see a mental health condition. He sees an adult man who's pretty cool. And he's saying, yeah, I know it's really, really difficult. It's good to be able to just come out and get a break. And he felt so validated. And that was such a healthy thing to be able to do. So yeah, foyer is sacred, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to not feel judged. Again, it's the implication. If you walk out of a lesson, then that means that you're not interested in what's being said. And if you're not interested in what's being said, then that means that you must be this. And if that's the case, then it just goes on and on and on. And at what point, I guess, when I bring in my own bias and thinking about when I held to the belief in God and that he understood where I was at, that would always be in constant conflict with people who are telling me how I should be a member and how I should behave, because it's like, well, I feel like I'm okay. I feel like God understands why I don't want to be at the room at the moment, and yet I'm feeling this, the pressure from someone else, and ultimately it's like, if you believe that God is fully aware of everything that you're going on, it's okay. It's okay to step away. It's okay for that dialogue to be between you and God.
And exactly, and
that will sound heretical to some people, though.
No, because I think it can't be undersold that. I'm using one family example. We've all had our own examples. Every one of my friends, mental health is so prevalent today. We're talking about it like never before. And so when you see a kid who's being validated by someone who has authority, that's a wonderful thing. But also, this situation is coming about because you have a child, a little boy who is giving everything, who's been woken up in the night because his brother with special needs is hitting him and he doesn't know what to do. And he feels responsible for the entire world, the well-being of people that he can't possibly, control, or has no need to be thinking about these things, but he is. And he comes to church and hears, we have to do better. What more can we do in our families? What else could you do to show your mum how much you love her today? And I mean, it's horrific. Children who just need to be.
It's a burden.
Horrible. So yeah, it both created it, and we could see some real difficulties there. And the end of our story at the moment is that Logan doesn't go to church because it's, he doesn't find it mentally healthy for him to do so. And yeah, I guess that's the other question that I have for you, because this is I think where our minds immediately go. I feel uncomfortable in church. You can leave, right? But there's there are all of these barriers to us even thinking that. The assumption is I'm here and I want to stay. Somebody else who is listening to what I'm struggling with would say that straight away. My non-member husband, well, why are you going then? I mean, it's a no-brainer. I don't even always know why. So what do we... is it that I'm constantly pushing an idea away? How do we engage with that? Should we be engaging with that? And I'm asking someone who made that decision for themselves. How did you deal with that question?
So, to share a little bit about my journey, I won't belabor anyone with the full details, but um, as part of my journey, you know, I became very unwell, and I was struggling to see a future for myself and struggling to see, you know, how alive I wanted to be, you know, at the end of the day. And uh, the conflict that I faced at the time was this idea that I wouldn't be given a trial, you know, that would
Yes.
be too great for me. And I remember thinking, but if I'm at the point where I don't want to be alive anymore, at what point does that scripture come into effect? You know, if I'm already at that stage where I feel like I am at the end, I'm at the end of my rope. I can't do this anymore. The idea, if I remained in that situation, and that experiences that I was having as a direct result of my faith transition, not feeling accepted, feeling very alienated from the group, um, losing my identity, losing all these things. You know, the idea that it took for me to just decide, actually, if I stay here, I'm not going to be here anymore.
Yeah.
So I think it would be, in my case at the time, I remember thinking, well, then I can't. You know, I can't justify it. Even if I believed it were true.
Mm.
That's the thing. I couldn't justify it because that it would mean the end of my life. And it doesn't need to be that talking in those extremes. It can be simply, you know, in the same way that when we take stock of our relationships with other people, you know, in our lives, whether they're romantic partners or friends, or if there's a toxicity that we really feel deeply that we're experiencing, we're noticing that it's impacting our mental health,
Mm-hmm.
our physical health. If we're seeing damage and damage and damage in all these different ways, why would it be that church is the only place, whether it's true or not? Why would it be that this is the only place where we just can't go? We just need to stay. You know, despite whatever impact it's having, is a bit of a mystery to me. Really, it doesn't make sense to me. I find it hard to get into that headspace. I know that there are those deeply held feelings of why it's important to go to church and why we need to do whatever we can to make it work. But in some situations where it just doesn't work for me, this environment, these people, these songs, these ideas about things, it just, it's not just doesn't just feel wrong. It feels painful. It feels like I just don't want to be near it. It's okay to negotiate your own relationship with any group, with any person. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to think, yeah, I'm going to go to church today, and then get there and think, no, no, maybe I'll try again
Yeah.
another time, but no, I'm gonna give this out. It's okay. Just you're working it out. It's okay to negotiate your relationship with
Mm.
with people, with organizations. There is nothing wrong with that. And again, bringing God into it. If you have that perspective of God, that they, and in Christ, even through the atonement, who the claim is that he absolutely, to the minutest point, understands our experience. The idea that entity would then throw the book at us because we didn't feel capable to continue in that moment. That would be that idea of God or Jesus is a mystery to me. It's something that I struggle to relate to. But if you had a
Yeah.
physical ailment that meant you couldn't go to church for whatever reason, why is it different if we
Mm.
say that my anxiety or um, my pain, my trauma that I've experienced at church through the leaders, institutions, members, why does that mean that I have to stick around? Why is it not okay for me, for my own health, to say it will, it's going to get sorted. still believe, but I can't be in this environment. This isn't healthy for me. It's okay to step back. It's okay to
Beautiful.
revisit it if you feel like it, but it's okay to
And
step back.
wouldn't it be wonderful if we were a community that could honour that and bless that, and and not have to close the door? That's it. You've gone. That means that means there is this thing that's happened, a decision that's made, and that you wouldn't find in other faiths, maybe that you wouldn't find in other institutions and organisations. One of the things that I found most empowering, this is possibly what allows me to be in this space. I really struggle with a lack of choice. If I don't have any choice, I become very, very distressed. That's the road to madness and depression for me. It's a horrible feeling. When I realised that if I really wanted to know if me being here is right, not that, let me think of how to explain that well. Not that the church is true or not true, not that discussion at all, because it almost is irrelevant. If choosing to stay engaged with the church and attending is going to be something that I am going to choose to continue to do, then there has to be a what will happen if I don't. And I don't entirely even right now know what that will look like for me. But what I do know is what I did learn, and I'm certain about, is that I will be fine. I've got no idea how, and I know that it's a scary thought, because I haven't been a Jane who doesn't affiliate with church. This is a lot of, has been so much of my life. I'll be fine. And as soon as I know that I have a choice, then it becomes a choice. Then it's not just a sentence that I'm trapped in, because, well, you made the covenant, so so there is no. That means that when I go to church and I do feel anxious, I can choose what is right for my situation. So realistically, I think most of the audience are aware, I physically don't get to go to church because my son, who's 24, has a lot of care needs, and I just physically can't get out of the house. Mornings are a no-go because I've been up all night, and so church has become really, really tough. But when I live my life knowing that every week the goal is to go on a Sunday, and it's never, ever, every week it falls through. Every week it doesn't happen. It's horrible. So it's not a good feeling. So while we have that sort of negativity attached to it, the worst thing is sort of thinking about, oh my goodness, what about the week when I can go? When I remember what I'm engaging in, I don't always feel like here is a safe place to be me, or here is a place where my family are safe to be them. And so that happens days ahead. And so I guess what I'm thinking about is just how important community is, that when we have these online spaces, and when we can have these discussions and these feelings are normalized, and when we realize that, oh my goodness, so many people who are going to church are feeling like this. And, if church has become something to be survived, that's where we know we have a problem. And while we do all of this stuff and changing what is not right about the church, I am the main thing that I can focus on right now. So if it means boundaries, then let's try them on. I would also add that when you have something wonderful like David's service that you can access, David, what's your website again that we can share a link to if people need to ask you some questions and stuff?
Yeah, it's the website is David Sheppard, SHEPPARD, counselling.co.uk.
And you're on Facebook and things, and
Facebook.
Yeah.
My email's the same. It's ds@davidsheppardcounselling.co.uk.
Yeah, so we'll put all your links up. But I was thinking about how if therapy is important and you need to have someone support you or guide you through or that kind of sounding board, because like we're all finding so many things to process tonight and things we hadn't thought about before. That's really important. But I think when your ward can't be the people you need it to be, then maybe we extend out from that. That's what I found helpful, and that has been maybe finding Sunstone Community or Thrive Community or the Brit Vengers, and so for us and the Brit Vengers gang, we will have debriefs most weeks, and just just to sort of process. Okay, this is really hard, and I was kind of worried they were going to throw me out today, or okay, they let me in and take a picture, and someone stood beside me. Those kind of things I think are really helpful.
Can I just make
please, David? Yeah, would you jump in?
Yeah, just a really quick comment, which is that there are just a couple of words that you used a couple of minutes ago, which is that feeling of being in situations where you feel trapped. That there's it's one of the root causes of anxiety is that sense that I'm going to be in a situation that I can't get out of. Just really want to re-emphasize the idea that you can walk out at any point. You don't have to stay anywhere. If you'd like to go back, that's okay too, but you don't have to stay anywhere. Just knowing that if going to church can be a really triggering thing for you, and you're something that you're really concerned about. I'm concerned about this member or these people or this situation. When you know that you can leave at any time, it can really help with taking some of that built up pressure that's there, because you can leave. You don't have to stay.
Yeah, and when you say that, and because I want you to say it again, that is in spite of the fact that what you're being taught and what you're engaging with is this is your eternity. That these decisions, the decision that you're making to be here and engage in every minute detail that involves, that's eternity. That you're here, you've made this choice, and that's what it's going to look like. Meanwhile, you have this message of, well, actually you can leave. It doesn't have to be eternity. Yeah. That I think when the stakes are so high, it's everything. Or there's the poor people over there for whom it's nothing. But actually reframing it with, no, you can leave. It doesn't have to be.
The idea that you're, and sometimes it can feel that way, the idea that your world collapses because you decide to miss a meeting. I mean, if that is actually the requirement, good grief. I don't know how any one of us would function if the stake was that we either did everything completely, perfectly correct. That is the only acceptable way, because that feels very contradictory. If in the moment you feel as though your health, your mental health, your well-being is at risk, in order to help yourself and to heal, that you need to step away for a bit, for a longer time, or forever, I don't understand why that wouldn't be acceptable.
Yeah.
Because are you going to be listening? Are you going to be taking things in if you're sat having a panic attack? Are you who benefits from that situation exactly?
It's so funny to be consistently focusing on agency and choice, and actually taking that step back and reframing it helps me understand what that really is. It feels like agency and choice. David, as we've been here for for a while, are there any other things that you prepared that you want to share with us, because this is so valuable?
Oh, there are, but I don't want to to go on for too long. I
No,
suppose
we've got time. We are
yeah.
going to ask you to come back. We have something else we want to ask you to do, but we'll talk about that later. But no, please, if you've got anything that you'd like to share, let's do it.
I suppose that the notes that I'd gotten down for just that how to get through if you do decide to stay engaged with church and that's important to you, you want to get through it. I guess to sum up really is again that message of it's okay to leave at any point. It's okay to say no thank you to participation involving in any aspect of church service, whether that's taking the sacrament or saying a prayer or closing your eyes during a prayer or reading a scripture or a quote in lesson. If you were not present, these practices would happen anyway. And
Not
do not
singing
require.
the hymn is like that.
Yeah.
That was quite a powerful one. I remember Lindsay Hansen Park on her Year of Polygamy podcast had talked about how when she was engaging in church and she chose not to sing the hymns, and it was an act of mourning for her. There was a conscious decision to do that, and it was both a spiritual practice, an act of protest. Just beautiful things. I love hearing how boundaries can look. That's so good.
Yeah, boundaries are what keep us safe, and they don't have to be things that come from an authority. Our own boundaries. We are our own people. We are entitled to set whatever boundaries that we feel are necessary and important to keep ourselves, mentally and physically safe.
Can I ask? So David and my son are good friends. David has been just so helpful in our family. Which is why I can absolutely recommend to check out his website and give him a chat if you do need any support. But my son has a real problem with saying no and putting his needs before anyone else's, and it is a real issue. And so if just simple things like if I keep talking to him and there is something he has to leave to go and do, he physically can't leave the room while I'm laughing and saying, no, I'm gonna just keep talking to you here. What's the matter? Can't you? And he's like paralyzed. So we were having a chat, a few weeks ago, about him practicing being able to say no, or being able to say, no, I'm busy if you like, but that you don't have to give a reason, but we're going to start practicing this. So as some of the stuff we were doing is that, I will call on him, I will ask him for emergency help, specifically when I know he's far too busy to do it, to give him practice of, how to say no and to feel really comfortable in it, because it's fine. We need to be able to do this.
Yeah.
How am I teaching my son this when possibly we need more practice ourselves as a community? Do you have any advice on how we can get better at saying no? Because it's easy for us to say that. Saying no at church is really tough. Any thoughts on how we can work on that?
Yeah.
Come round to my house and I'll ask you to do stuff and you can say it to me.
It goes back to that idea, showing ourselves compassion in that, when we experience other people that they're struggling and that we want to help, like it's there's nothing wrong with that feeling of wanting to alleviate suffering but it needs to come with the understanding that everything that has brought a person to a certain point, there are so many factors, there is so much context that brings anyone to any one decision or any situation. And if that person is struggling in that situation, it might be that you are in a position to help them. And fantastic, you might be mentally well enough, you might have the finances, whatever it is, you may be in that position, and that is awesome. But you might not, and that person may need help, they may need support. It just might not be you that is able to support them at that time. I guess the physical example that comes to mind, and it's tragic. The stories are absolutely awful. But when you hear about people, for example, if someone falls into the sea, or a deep river, and the advice is to get help, to get as soon as possible, get the appropriate support for the situation, because if you jump in, there is a really good chance that you're just going to go down with them, and if you've not saved the person, and you've endangered yourself as well, and that impact will then impact all of your sphere, so it turns into a catastrophe. Part of the work that I do within counseling, is a really important part for me, is to make sure that when I'm listening to what people are talking about and the issues that they have, I need to assess whether or not this is someone that I feel is appropriate to work with for me.
Yeah.
I need to make sure that I understand in my own mind that there are going to be things that they bring up that I have absolutely no idea necessarily in the moment how to deal with them. But I can do what I can. I can support where I can, and if I need to, I can refer them to someone more specialist, or I can refer them to other services. It doesn't have to be me, and it's not my responsibility to fix someone else's situation. But if I can help, if I can do something, that doesn't mean that I'm putting my own needs on the back burner, because I suppose that's where it gets dicey, is that idea that this other person's needs and the help that they need is more important than our own. And part of living in a trying to live in an assertive way is that understanding that my needs and their needs are both important. How can we meet each other's needs? Is that possible? Do I need to bring someone else in? Do I need something else to change? Because it's not down to me to fix this. I can't take on the weight of the world. But if there is a little thing that I can do, awesome. But I might not, and that's okay too. That doesn't speak anything against me personally.
I love that. David, thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure and so helpful. I'm going to ask him, and David said a lot about saying no, but I know he's going to say yes to coming back. We've got so many things to talk about. We really appreciate this. Thank you so much to the honesty and vulnerability of everyone in the comments. We really appreciate how you have helped shape the show tonight.
Yeah. Thank you.
The super chats. Thank you so much. That was a real treat for us to be able to see that that happening live. So thank you for looking out for us. Don't forget, we've got the new website. We want you to go and check it out. See if you can break it. I don't know, but it's because there's things that we are still working on that need to be done. We really want you to come to the training that we're going to do, the workshop that we're going to do. So if you would like to see safeguarding happening in your area, if you want to see what's happening in the UK, happening across the world, and you're not entirely sure how that could happen, you're not entirely sure if you want to be involved, or maybe you're kind of thinking about it, maybe you think there's some people that you know that might be really interested in it, we're working with some really great people, not just our expertise, but also experts from across the world who are able to help you see if you can, what you can bring to your area. Next week, we are going to be back here with Ruth and Sarah. We are going to be doing a show entitled Jane, Sarah, Ruth and Barbie. So if you've been living under a rock for this past few weeks and you need to go watch the Barbie movie, now's the week to do it. There will be spoilers, which is just, please don't do spoilers. And it's very traumatic, the thought that I could ruin a movie for anyone. There's a special circle of outer darkness for people who spoil movies. And if you need us in the meantime, just let us know. Now, if you want to know more about David's work, we will put a link in the show notes. Again, he's over on Facebook and he has his website. David, do you want to shout out what your website is again?
Yeah, it's David Sheppard Counselling.co.uk. Facebook, Instagram as well, and please get in touch.
And so even if you want to reach out with any questions, David, if he can't help himself, he can certainly point you in the right direction. So with that, thank you so much for being with us tonight. See you guys who are hanging out in the chat. See if you're over Mormonism Live later on. It will be great to see you there. And for you all, have a good night. See you next week.
Take care. Thanks, Jane.